Candice Owens was on Piers Morgan's show, and she totally put Piers Morgan in his place. And we're just going to react to a moment here where they argue over the COVID vaccine.
I think this tweet was anti-Semitic. You're saying that I'm dishonest because I believe what he said was anti-Semitic. And I think that's ridiculous. No, I am saying that,
well, first off, just to start back at the beginning of this interview, I think you're dishonest for a lot of other reasons. So please don't, harp on this one tweet. But yeah, because you flip-flop on your positions the entire time. That's the reason why I tweeted those things about you. But I mean, everything. COVID, you flip-flopped on COVID. You flip-flopped on BLM. At 1 minute, you were supporting BLM, and then you're like, my son's out protesting. It's amazing. And then when they're burning stuff down, I don't find you to be someone that actually takes meaningful risks and says what you believe. You kind of take both positions all the time.
Well, actually, I'm not an ideologue about any of it.
So don't pretend that the first time I ever suggested you were dishonest.
I'm not an ideologue about any of these things. Right, so you want me to be an ideologue? You want me to stick to one side on everything?
No, I'm just saying that it seems like once the conversation cracks, and this is a lot of people in media, they don't take risks. They deliver the government talking points, and then they move once it kind of becomes okay to question the government. So COVID, this was the prevailing narrative. You were like, get the vaccine, If you don't do the vaccine, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden now we're finding out that, and you would have called someone like me, anti-vax, trying to kill someone, all of these things. Well, I didn't get the vaccine. My family didn't get the vaccine.
Piers actually said that he was going to get the COVID vaccine live on air. And he did, I think. And he was really pushing this vaccine as if they were paying him to. You know, he was seriously mocking anybody who questioned anything. And Piers does that. He mocks anybody with any common sense because he's a sheltered little posh boy.
And now we're on the other side of this thing, and people are like, well, maybe I had it wrong. Maybe I have some regrets.
What do you think I've expressed regrets over?
Going with the mainstream narrative in the beginning.
Don't just keep talking. What do you think I've expressed regret about with COVID?
Well, let me ask you, are you still standing by all the stuff you said about people being idiots for not getting the vaccine?
Yeah, the only thing I changed, because the scientific advice changed, and I've accepted that if there was another health pandemic, I would not rush to accept scientific advice in real time as actually 100% irrefutable, never to change, because science evolves, and especially in a health emergency. The one thing I have said I changed my mind over, because the science advice changed, was that originally they advised that if you had the vaccine, then you could not transmit the virus. And I was then very censorious towards people who simply refused to have the vaccine, because I said, it's not about you, it's actually about your ability to transmit it and maybe infect more vulnerable people. And I thought it was selfish.
Well, that's a pretty big change.
Well, hang on, let me finish. And I was very censorious, way too censorious. I've admitted that. Shouldn't have been so censorious. And when the science advice changed and said, actually, there's now evidence that suggests, and in fact, it looks clear, the evidence, that if you have the vaccine, it makes little difference to your ability to transmit the virus or not, then I changed my position. And when I was asked about that later, I said, absolutely. I should not have been so censorious to people who didn't have it, because at that point, it becomes personal choice. But if you ask me on the wider picture, do I think the COVID vaccines were a good thing? Absolutely. Do I think they saved millions of lives? Absolutely. Do I think the deliberate attempt to discredit all science involved in the COVID pandemic is a dangerous, dangerous thing for society? Absolutely. Do I know lots of people who died from COVID who would potentially have been saved by a vaccine if it had been there when they caught the virus? Absolutely. So do not take my one clarification about the ability of a vaccine to prevent transmission as being some great mea culpa that I think...
That's a huge mea culpa, Piers.
Well,
that's a huge mea culpa. That's a huge mea culpa. Because that means that you let people to go out and to get an experimental vaccine in their arm and encourage them not to listen to independent voices that were saying, hold on. That's a huge mea culpa. People died from the vaccine. So you're talking about people that died from not getting it. There have been scores of people who died died from the vaccine. There have been scores of people like my grandfather who got the vaccine and then were dead within 1 year because it led to their dementia suddenly spreading or advancing rather in a way. Stop. I let you
You do not know that was down to the vaccine, do you?
Okay. First and foremost, they have admitted so much. They lied about the 6 feet social distancing. That just came out 2 weeks ago. And you were on the side of all of these people. So don't pretend that that's a small mea culpa. People died from blood clots.
Look at Piers' face. He's chewing on lemons right now because he knows he's being absolutely sunned.
Pertaining to the vaccines that you were telling them to rush out and get, okay?
People died
had they have waited and perhaps listened to independent voices who understood that there was some government. No, I let you talk. I let you talk about your mea culpa. Had they have paused and listened to independent voices who have, I think, probably a greater strength when it comes up to standing up to government initiatives, because we recognize that the government is not our friend, and we recognize that the government is not trying to save our lives. Maybe those people would be alive. Maybe my friends who had miscarriages and my friends who were saying that it was impacting their menstruation until the government was ready to admit that 7 months later. If you had listened to people that were telling you their own experiences, someone I know that went completely blind in one eye because of some weird ocular clots. So don't pretend that's a small thing. I just want to say, I'm happy to accept that you've changed your mind.
Let me respond.
But don't pretend it's a small thing. People died from the vaccine.
Let me respond.
And by the way, I want to be clear for people watching this. He's saying still get it. I'm saying still don't. Just so you can hear a different opinion. Do not allow the government to put that in your arm.
Okay.
God's system works. The government is not fixing you in any regard.
And do you feel the same way about the flu shot?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I haven't gotten a flu shot since I was like 12.
Okay. And things like polio and measles and all the other shots that we give kids?
Let's skip to the point. You might know this. I don't vax my children. They are not vaxxed. We travel the world. My children are never sick. I am proudly, as you media terms it, anti-vax. I'm very aware of the psychological wounds of coming up with names for people for making sensible decisions. I don't believe, Big Pharma is not God.
I understand.
Okay? Big Pharma is very much, in my view, getting in the way of God's designs.
I absolutely respect your right to do what you want for your children. I did the complete opposite for mine. I believe that all vaccines carry risks. By the way, paracetamol carries risks. Ibuprofen carries risks. Any medication, you will find instances of side effects and deaths. Every medication in the world that's ever been created. But do I think overall that COVID vaccines saved millions of lives and were an incredible thing done at warp speed in the middle of a desperate pandemic that was killing thousands of people every day? Absolutely, I do. So you and I will disagree about that.
You're just simply wrong.
Well, you and I disagree about that.
We're never going to agree on it. Yeah,
okay.
100% disagree on that.
But here's the beauty. We don't have to agree about it.
That's right.
Right?
But I wish that when you said you were being censorious, I wish that you would have allowed people who strongly disagreed to present their arguments at that time, because I think that a lot of people who are now struggling and getting blood clots and things of that nature, their lives could have been saved.
I don't disagree with you. I had a lot of people around me dying from COVID in the most hideous, horrendous circumstances. The co-presenter of the show, the morning show I was doing, her husband went into a coma and never really came out of it, and sadly died a few months ago after 4 years. Right? Had there been a vaccine when he got the virus in March in the first wave, he might well have lived. And that,
I don't think the vaccine would. I personally don't believe that the vaccine would have saved him, and it's an impossible metric to know.
Because you don't think the COVID vaccine saved any lives?
I genuinely do not believe that the COVID vaccine saved any lives.
You see, I'm sorry. You're a smart person, Candice.
Thank you.
You cannot believe that the COVID vaccines saved no lives. That is a ridiculous thing to say.
It's not. You can't, just because you're saying ridiculous and just because you're using little.
The truth is that vaccine wasn't even a vaccine. The truth is that vaccine was a genetic altering technology. The fact they're calling it a vaccine is the problem for me, because that's not what it was.
Hyperbole doesn't make that real.
Every single scientist in the world. There is not a scientist or doctor.
You just said the science changes literally 5 minutes ago.
Let me put a question to you, then you can answer it. Every single scientist and doctor in the world that I'm aware of agrees that vaccines save lives. They may disagree about various points of government behaviour during the pandemic. They may disagree about this particular vaccine or another one. What none of them have said is what you've just said, which is it never saved any lives. None of them.
Well, I just want to be clear.
Only you
Whenever
think it
you're
saved
claiming
no
that
lives.
there's 100% scientific consensus, you're lying. Whether you're talking about climate change, if you
Name me
make a
one
declaration
doctor.
that
Name me
there is
one
100%
doctor. Name me one
scientific
professional
consensus on
doctor.
something,
All right.
you're simply lying. And
Name
by
me
the way,
one
if people, well, let me
ask you a
you
question.
lied, so I'm just going to correct your lie by pointing people to websites that can dispute this narrative, because it's a fashionable one to say 100% of experts agree. That is,
let me ask you a
as soon
question.
as somebody tells you there's 100%
Candice,
scientific consensus, they are lying to you.
Let me ask you. Can you name me one professional doctor or scientist who genuinely believes, like you, that the COVID vaccines did not save a single life?
I can point you to many, because there are anti-vax doctors.
Can you name one?
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm going to point to an entire website, because this is actually important, because RFK Jr. has played a very large role in my awakening about vaccines and my decision not to vaccinate my children. I recommend you go to a long list of doctors. childrenshealthdefense.org. That is his charity.
Yeah.
And they have multiple doctors listed. You can also go to Dr. Green Mom's website if you want a list of doctors who do not vax your children, because just so you know, they are vaccinating your children because it is profit for them. It is a profit incentive for every child that is vaccinated. I want to be clear, I'm talking about America. I can't speak to the UK laws and the UK policies, but what we are living inside of is actually a corrupt medical drug cartel. It is the aspirations of El Chapo when they wanted to have a marriage with the government in order to drug people. We achieved that here in the West. In America, CDC, they are corrupt. The
Candice,
FDA is corrupt. They have been poisoning your food.
Candice,
and if you believe that they would mandate... You were asking me a question, I'm answering it. I'm telling people where to go to if they'd like more information.
You're veering off into all sorts of other things. Let me just ask you on a more all-encompassing thing. Do you believe you're prone to promoting conspiracy theories?
Right there. So Piers, whilst Candice is explaining herself and absolutely annihilating him because he didn't realise she was going to have an answer, she had more than an answer. She had 10 answers. And as she's listing her 10 responses to him, he says that she's veering off, and as she's answering his question, he asks her a ridiculous question about, do you just like all conspiracy theories, or whatever he said. This guy's such an egomaniac, you know.
I believe that I am aware where the entire term of conspiracy theory came from. Do you know when that became fashionable?
Tell me.
No.
He doesn't know.
So the first time that was sort of entered into the lexicon, that was a CIA term. And this is also gets into, and you can look this up right now, Operation Mockingbird, after JFK was killed, and the government started employing journalists to just repeat what they said.
Right.
And
what do you think happened to JFK?
He was shot. I think everyone knows that.
Yeah, but who by?
I have no idea.
I mean, do you support any conspiracy theory about the JFK shooting?
Well, according to ex-mob members, that JFK was apparently assassinated by the mob. It was, that's what I've heard.
Do you?
It was Michael Francis that said that, Michael Francis said that JFK was assassinated by the mob.
I don't know.
Well, you referenced it. I didn't reference it.
No, I was referencing it to tell you a historical point about Operation Mockingbird. And
so back to my original question. Do you think you promote?
Hold on, can I just finish my thought? You're asking me questions, then you're giving me 5 seconds to respond.
Well, no, you're not asking my question.
So my point to answer you about the conspiracy theory before you're asking me about JFK getting shot.
You're giving me the history of conspiracy theories.
Oftentimes, what the media does, and I do believe that people watching the show are awake to this. This is why I'm very confident in this discussion of what I am telling them, is that they use this term conspiracy theory so that you don't question the narrative. And you just saw this with COVID, everybody. You saw them calling everybody who said that the idea that the shot was going to stop you from being able to transmit COVID was a lie. They were called conspiracy theorists. And then it was proven to be true.
Yes.
So if it wasn't happening so quickly that all of the conspiracy theories kept turning out to be true.
None of this was my question. I wasn't talking about COVID. I simply asked you, do you believe that you promote conspiracy theories?
No, I believe that I have the courage to actually talk about the truth.
So let me ask you about this.
The following is because
I have
said many things. Piers, let me finish.
You've answered my question. You said no.
You have me on your show, and I'm answering, and you just keep cutting me off.
Well, no, you keep talking, hoping not to get a supplementary.
Well, Piers, if you want me to interview you, I'm happy to have you on my show.
I'd love
that. But the point of you being somebody that's interviewing is you ask a question and you allow your guest the time to answer.
But let me ask you.
Yeah, I would love to have
you on. I want to ask you specifically about something you've been promoting that I think is an outrageous conspiracy theory very offensive, very wrong, and I think you've done it just for clout and clicks. Now, you can respond, but it's this question about the French First Lady, Brigitte Macron, who you keep saying is a man. You've produced zero evidence that she is a man. It's been deeply offensive to her husband, President Macron, to all of her family. You keep promoting it to millions of people that follow you. And I simply ask why. She's not a man, she's a woman.
I'm happy to answer the question. I think Brigitte Macron is a trans woman. And I think the fact that
not.
when Brigitte Macron...
What is this about?
Okay.
Where's your evidence that she is?
Well, Piers, the thing is I'm not allowed to speak after you ask me a question, so I don't really know what the purpose of this is anymore. You just seem to kind of be saying your own thoughts. So I'm just going to be silent here and allow you to monologue.
Where is your evidence that Brigitte Macron is transgender?
Well, I did an entire series talking about where this came from. And first and foremost, you're pretending that I'm the one that promulgated this. In fact, it was 3 journalists in France that worked on the story for 3 years.
Right.
And they teamed up with genealogists and they came across, and it was absolutely fascinating. I read the entire report, and everybody watching this, rather than listen to Piers Morgan giving you a bunch of adjectives, ridiculous, it's awful, I can't believe that she's saying this. Why don't you go pursue a primary source? Why don't you go find the articles that were written by the French journalists? Because this did not come from me. This came from French journalists.
And while they were working,
let me finish a statement, Piers.
Okay.
While they were working on this piece, the Macrons sent their secret service to interrupt this. This is not a normal thing that you do when somebody's about to publish a lie. You would just say it's ridiculous, publish it, and we'll dispute it. They sent the secret service to intimidate these journalists. They took their phones, they held them, they wanted to know everyone who was working on the piece. And what they uncovered was absolutely fascinating. What they uncovered was the fact that Brigitte Macron, who alleges that the person that they are saying is her is actually her brother, who's never been seen and who they never produced, that Brigitte Macron lived as a man for 30 years and then transitioned at the age of 30. So he's trying to tell you this is crazy, this is wacky. Why don't you just go pursue a primary source?
Well, I don't need to.
Well, that's enough of that. We're just going to skip now to the Diddy conversation I've spotted down here. So you see Piers Morgan, he doesn't like it when someone actually answers his questions because he sees everything as an egotistical debate battle where he has to be right. And he cannot give in to being wrong because I think he's a bit of a narcissist, this dude. But we're going to talk about Diddy.
Honesty is demanded. More journalists should be prodding into the story internationally to see what's actually going on here, because at best, you have a perverted story that, in my view, leads way too closely into pedophilia. Just the story of how they got together is weird. You have a allegedly gay man, the person who's had gay affairs with him has spoken out, talked about the drugs that he has done with Macron, and you have these two people who are utterly demented leading the state of France. So I'm not going to sit here and go into, but you're a mommy, don't you care, Candice, about how she's feeling? No, it's perverted. At best, Brigitte Macron is a pervert.
Let's move to Sean Diddy Combs, because you seem to be under the belief that the reason he is not in jail, you said in March, is because he's a Fed CIA asset. Kanye tried to tell everybody. Do you still believe that?
Well, I was just reading the actual court documents of what's being filed against him, and so I'm following the case.
But do you believe he's a Fed CIA asset?
Well, as I've said on my show, if what is in that case, which seemed very compelling because they had pictures and evidence and they were able to show when he shot someone and they told the particular person that cleans up that you're supposed to call, that's in the LAPD, that allows him to shoot people in broad daylight, allegedly. I'm just saying allegedly because this case is still moving through the system. Plus, obviously, you saw the video that circulated of him openly beating Cassie, his ex-girlfriend, and the fact that this man is doing all of these things. The person filing the lawsuit produced photos of somebody that he had allegedly shot and gave the name of the person at the LAPD that cleaned it up and showed that the media had covered it. Yeah, that would definitely lead me to believe that Diddy is being protected, because most people can't shoot somebody in broad daylight and beat their wife
but
at
just to be clear, though,
at a hotel.
But again, you have no evidence that he is a Fed or CIA
No,
asset.
I'm not the one filing the lawsuit. So I just read the lawsuit.
You have no evidence, do you? I mean, when you state it as fact, he's not in jail because
what do you
he's
mean
a Fed CIA
I covered the lawsuit. What are you protecting right now? It's an open lawsuit that anybody can go read with the photos established. So I'm covering it, and I am putting two and two together and going, this lawsuit, which has been filed with a ton of proven evidence.
Again, you're being disingenuous because actually you're stating it as fact.
No, what I'm telling people,
in the same way you say, I state my entire reputation, Brigitte Macron's a man, you also stated this fact, nothing from a lawsuit. You just said he's not in jail, you tweeted, because he's a Fed CIA asset. Kanye tried to tell everybody.
Have you read the lawsuit? Because it seems like you haven't, obviously.
But that's your statement.
Did you read the lawsuit? That's the first thing, because we can skip the hyperbole. Did you read the lawsuit?
I'm asking you.
Okay, then we're not going to talk about this topic because you're pretending these statements are starting with me.
I'm not talking about what's in the lawsuit.
If you have not read the lawsuit that was filed with all of the evidence and the pictures and the proof, no, that it's all about the lawsuit. You can't say I'm not talking about the lawsuit that had all the proof in it and then say you have no evidence.
Just to be clear, you just said that you would.
Here at William Hill Vegas, the excitement.
I think that's a good place to just stop this video as an advert plays for William Hill. Yeah, Piers Morgan is unbearable, you know. He's such an attention-seeking whore, and everything he does is just purely for argument's sake and for the sake of views, and it's all fake with him. He's a total fake. He's a total fake, and he's dangerous. He's the part of the reason so many people got injected with the vaccine. People like him and in the media. He's a total fraud, you know. He doesn't actually have any morals or standbys. He's a total Hollywood actor. In my view, he's just another part of Hollywood, is Piers Morgan. He's a Hollywood La La Land dangerous person to have to listen to. Never listen to him about anything. You can watch Piers Morgan for entertainment purposes only, but never, ever take advice from that guy.